I'm Hayden, in case you all don't know me. Thank you very much. I've been a leader, one of the leaders for this youth group for 2 years now, almost. And yeah, I just love it. I've been part of the youth group for 6 years. So June 11th, 2013 is where my story begins. That was my 13th birthday. It was also the day my dad went away for a deployment. It was supposed to be over a year, and I remember that was one of the first times I ever prayed. I was raised atheist. My parents to this day are atheists, so I never really prayed, but I prayed for a reason for my dad to come home sooner, be home, be with us, see him sooner, because he was in the ocean. He couldn't FaceTime, he couldn't really text. So fast forward to March 6th, 2014. I remember every detail of that day. I had a history project that I had presented. It's horrible sinus infection, so sick. I presented, I was so nervous, but I told my mom I can't go to school the next day. So March 7th, 6:30 in the morning, my mom comes down, she checks on me, she said, "Hey, you think you could go to school?" I said, "No." I couldn't move my legs. I'd crawl up the stairs, get breakfast, and my mom said, "All right, you stay home." A couple hours later, my mom comes home. She came home to check on me because I didn't answer my phone. She found me unconscious on the floor. She was panicking, and I don't remember what happened after that, because that day I got rushed to the emergency room. I was put in an MRI, and my mom had to sign a DNR form, which is a do not resuscitate, which means if I were to pass away during the MRI, which was expected, they would not bring me back to life. So I was in a semi-comatose state for 5 days after that, and I don't remember any of it. I was somewhat awake, and when I woke up, doctors told my parents I would probably never walk again. I was paralyzed from the neck down, and this is where first part of my story comes in. Prayer was answered March 14th. We're at March 12th. That's when I woke up. March 14th, 2014. My dad came home and surprised me. My dad is my best friend. He's been my best friend my whole life, and I didn't know anything about what was going on. I remember that day, though, I had a feeding tube put in. I remember yelling, "Why me? Why me?" And so I couldn't move, could barely react, and I just felt pain. But looking back on it 6 years later, I realized why me, so I could share what happened. And this is where my verses come in. So Mark chapter 2, and again he entered Capernaum after some days, and it was heard that he was in the house. Immediately many gathered together, so that there was no longer room to receive them, not even near the door. And he preached the word to them. Then they came to him, bringing a paralytic man who was carried by 4 men. And when they could not come near him because of the crowd, they uncovered the roof where he was. So when they had broken through, they had let down the bed on which the paralytic man was laying. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." And some of the scribes were sitting there reasoning with their hearts, "Why does this man speak blasphemy of this? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" But immediately Jesus perceived in his spirit that they reasoned thus within themselves. He said to them, "Why do you reason about these things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven you,' or to say, 'Arise, take up your bed and walk'? But that you may know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive you, arise, take up your bed and go to your house." Immediately he arose, took up his bed, and went out in the presence of all of them, so that all were amazed and glorified God. We never saw anything like this, they said. So there you see God make the paralyzed man walk again. So this is me. It's June 2014. I was out of the hospital at this point. It's my 2 little sisters and my dog. I was not 100% at this point. I was out of the hospital. This is after 3 months of 3 times a week physical therapy, pushing myself, because I told the doctors the day they said I'd probably never walk again, I'm gonna walk, I'm gonna run. So this is, I don't remember the date. This is my first time walking upstairs after the accident. And this is at probably 3 weeks into my physical therapy at the hospital. As you can see, I was determined. Day 2, after I started walking again. For about a year and a half after I got walking down, I had to walk with a cane, and every so often I would use a wheelchair. I still have back issues to this day. Still, if you pay attention real close, you'll notice I don't walk right. I always walk with a limp. My right foot, I can't straighten it while I'm walking. This day, I was told if I could walk through these bars without stumbling, I could go home for a couple hours. So determined. So my parents, one day after my dad had come home, I'd been in for about a week. I still couldn't move anything. Parents weren't there, my sisters weren't there, and the hospital chaplain came into my room. And like I said, I was raised atheist. I didn't believe in God at this point. I didn't believe that there was any higher power. I thought after life you just went dark. And the chaplain came in my room. He asked to speak to me. I said, sure. I was bored out of my mind. I was a 13-year-old kid bored out of my mind. And he read me Mark chapter 2, what I just read you. And I remember thinking, it's just a story. And I told my parents about it the next morning. They said, yeah, I mean, maybe we'll see how we go, but odds are you won't be able to walk again. Something like that. I can't remember what word for word, but 2 days later, I got movement in my right foot. And doctors were baffled completely. No one thought I'd get the movement back. No one thought I'd be able to do anything. So I remember sitting down in the conference room with the doctors, with my parents, and they were asking, okay, what next? How do we get Hayden his feet back? It was that next day that they said, all right, we're gonna start easy. We're gonna have you sit up on your own. Day after day, there was progress. The first day I sat up on my own, was able to hold myself up, and then I was able to stand, take a step, take another step, and then after 3 weeks, I was able to walk from the room I was in to the physical therapy area, unassisted, no cane, no walker. I had a harness though, but that was just in case I fell. And at this point, I was still thinking what the chaplain read to me. It was in my head still. Like I was thinking about it. I was thinking, it's just a story, but it's happening. And so, fast forward another month. My dad, he has to go back. He had to go back on his deployment, and so he left. That was a very, very emotional day because it was tough, and I remember my dad pushed me to the wheelchair, or pushed me in his wheelchair, or my wheelchair, sorry, to the gate. He said, Hayden, you know what would make me proud if you actually proved Mark chapter 2 was real. And he gave me the challenge to walk unassisted by the time he came home, which was June 11th, 2014. It's actually 1 year after he left. He came home, surprised me after school, and I was still walking with a cane. I walked past him, I didn't notice him, and then I saw him, threw my cane to the side and walked over to him. And at at that point I realized, all right, it's not just a story. It's a story from the Bible. It's my story. It's happening. It's real. Like maybe a month later, I came here for the first time. The book they read that night was Mark chapter 2, and I realized it's not just a story. This is God working through me, in my heart, through my life, and I remember that night I got so emotional talking to Colin. He was here at that point. I told him my story, and I believe that night I got home, I prayed, and I cried, and that night I was saved. It was June 28th, 2014. It was the first night I came here. And that is the day I was saved. And since then, ditched the wheelchair completely, ditched the cane completely. I walk unassisted, I run, I can do basically anything. And I love sharing this story. I just don't know how to explain it besides this is proof that God is working through us. He's got a purpose for all of us. So this is why me, so I can share my story. From March 14th, me screaming, why me? This is why me, so I can share proof of God's existence with all of you.